All right, everyone. It is 12 o'clock. So we are going to get underway. Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Toon. I'm the LOC's Communications Director. Filling in this week for Patty Mulvihill. She's on leave. Welcome, everyone, to our legislative webinar and as we're wrapping up the 14th week of the 2025 legislative session. Before we start, a couple of housekeeping issues. If you have not yet done so, please make sure your microphone is muted. And second, we will also look to end this promptly at 1 o'clock. I would like you also to please update your screen name to include the city you represent. I will put some instructions on how to do that in the chat. We have a very full agenda today, so lots of new information. Going to do our best to move through it quickly so that we can take questions at the end of the presentations from our lobbyists. Here's a quick overview of the legislation, issues, and topics we're going to be discussing. We're going to start with recreational immunity, one of the LOC's top priority issues for the 2025 session. That'll be in our top bills of the week segment. Our second segment, looking at ongoing legislation, we'll hear about some new information related to transient lodging tax flexibility, an update on the 2025 transportation package, also an LLC top priority, the operator and training legislation, and then a couple of new bills we haven't talked about, one regarding threats to public officials and the other regarding assault due to occupation. And then we'll close out with our emerging issues segment, some important stuff in there, including an upcoming deadline related to ARPA funds and some really important information related to a grant program from FEMA. You want to stick around and hear about that. And then finally, we'll get an update on a bill we've touched on throughout the course of the session, Senate Bill 916, related to unemployment insurance for striking workers. Because of the volume of what we're going to cover today, we will be holding all questions until the end of the presentations. If you have a question along the way, please raise your Zoom hand or type your question in the chat feature. I and other staff will be watching the chat, and we'll answer those questions after all the presentations in the order in which they came in. So let's begin. And I'm going to bring in my colleague, Jim McCauley, LLC's Legislative Director, and he will walk us through the various bills along with his team. Jim, take it away.
Super. Thanks very much, Kevin. Great to see everybody today, and appreciate you, as always, joining our weekly updates. These continue to be our primary focus of legislative activity from one week to the next. We make sure that when we have these conversations, we actually have activity items or alerts and things of that nature for you to be able to respond to, as opposed to just simple updates. We've always, I think, found that to be the most efficient way to make sure that you know what's going on from week to week. Outside of that, certainly the bulletin continues to be at least maybe not the paper source anymore, but the electronic source for our communications, and then anything else that you get from us during the legislative process. So we've certainly gone past the midpoint of where the session is at this point in time. A couple more weeks down the road here in the middle of May, we'll hit second chamber deadline, which are critical for policy committees, effectively trimming down that list of bills that are still active for the remainder of the session. The key point that we get to in May here, towards the end of May, will be the May revenue forecast. That will ultimately set the stage for some of those final decision points on how money is going to get spent, what projects are going to get funded, and then effectively, I'll say, the scale of how some of the policies are going to be able to advance over the next fiscal years. I think one of the important things to always emphasize in this weekly communication is that when we send you out alerts, when we ask for information, it still remains incredibly critical for you to be able to respond in a timely manner. We use that information as we're going through the process. Sometimes it could be, what do you think about this piece of legislation? Sometimes it's trying to come up with a fiscal, and everybody, as in years past, has been terrific. Again, being able to respond every time we've asked for it, as well as outreach for legislators. That too remains incredibly important as we go forward. And that's going to kick up in intensity here over the next several weeks as we get to, physically starting to scale down in the session, but that's not going to happen until sometime in June. So with that, I want to have Scott Winkles come on and give you an update on Senate Bill 179. This remains a top priority and is I'll just say, a more permanent fix, hopefully, for recreational immunity than what he's already fixed multiple times over the last 5 or 6 years. So Scott, take it away.
Thank you, everybody. So this week we had a hearing in House Judiciary on Senate Bill 179. So this is the second chamber for this bill, and it is essentially restore or makes permanent the changes we made in the 2024 session after the Fields case out of Lincoln County, where the dog walker hiker was injured on a trail, exposed our cities to a great deal of additional liability. So the legislature passed a bill to make sure that the activities of walking, running, and cycling are listed explicitly in the rec community statute. There was a work group over the summer to look at some additional changes that we didn't get much. We did have to update the bill. We couldn't say horses, we had to say equine. And then that's about the big change. But the bill goes, we expect the bill to get a work session. If they're following pattern, work session, not next week, but the week after. And hopefully it'll go through. Didn't get a chance for a lot of questions. There was a lot of other stuff on that hearing in the hearing schedule, so didn't get the conversation that we anticipated. But it looks, coming out of the Senate on as wide a margin as it did, I think we're in okay shape. But obviously you'd want to still continue to talk to your legislators if you're having these general conversations with them. We're not going to, I don't think, given the vote margins in the Senate, we're not going to come out with a full alert. But in your normal communications with them, then absolutely, please mention this one.
Fabulous. Thanks very much, Scott. So we're hoping for a little bit more longevity out of this fix at this point.
Yeah, there's over the last, I would say 18 years or so, there's been a cycle of novel legal theory, challenge, legislative fix. And this is the fourth time we've gone through this cycle. So hopefully that this is going to come to an end. My understanding is the appellate court did uphold rec community in some other cases, so that's fortunate. But hopefully we won't be doing this one again.
Super, appreciate that. We're going to take a little bit of a shift now to really the legislative updates, top end priorities and stuff going forward here in the next week or so. And I'll let Jenna Jones come on here. She's our tax and finance, economic development lobbyist. And you've got the floor. We have a TLT flexibility bill and a little bit more life.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Easter was very close by. So we have resurrected the local transient lodging tax flexibility bill. I talked a lot about House Bill 3556 earlier in this, in this session's worth of calls. And that unfortunately did not make it past the first chamber deadline. It didn't make it out of the committee that it was in. But one of our sponsors, Representative Jules Walters, who is the vice chair of the Revenue Committee, was able to secure a different bill for us, and she has dropped it. It's House Bill 3962. The language is not in there for TLT yet. There will be an amendment coming to that, but it is now in the Revenue Committee, which is where we were trying to get our last bill. So I would start making calls to anyone on the House Revenue Committee. So if your representatives are Representative Nancy Nathanson, Warner Reschke, Jules Walters, Zach Hudson, Pam Marsh, Greg Smith, or Bobby Levy, please reach out to them and tell them that you support this bill. We don't know right now when it will be scheduled, but we need that outreach to happen soon because there's not so much of session left. So wanted to give you all the good news, and I'll put the bill number in the chat and also a link to all of those legislators I just named.
Thank you for that. So what about the basic messaging on this? I think most of our membership understands the transient lodging tax. They understand why we want the flexibility. Is there anything that they really need to zero in on with those legislators you suggested?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things, right? Balancing tourism with impacts on communities. I think we've also seen the shift to where there are more Airbnbs places than traditional hotels. I will say this committee is a lot more familiar with the transient lodging tax, but it's still great to kind of share, hard data around public safety needs that may or may not increase because you have more tourists in your town or just wear and tear on your critical infrastructure, on your parks, on things like public restrooms, things like that. And then lastly, we have been very supportive of if we need to negotiate on this bill going forward with the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association, that we're willing to come to the table and have a good faith negotiation. So if anyone asks oh, is LOC willing to join a table to negotiate on this, you can confidently tell them yes.
Yeah, super. And I suspect this is ultimately going to really tip on how much involvement our members have to help drive this and help leverage this policy over the finish line.
Yeah, and I will say this is one of the furthest we've gotten with a local TLT bill, and we also, on this version of the bill, also have more sponsors than we did with 3556. So your advocacy is working on transient lodging tax. So keep up the good work.
Super. Thank you very much for that one. So next one really kind of falls in my bucket of transportation advocacy. So, we're working on a transportation package for well over a year. This is not something that just gets put together during the session. A lot of that work took place over the summer into the fall. Several members were involved in the work group process that the Joint Committee on Transportation had. And all of those efforts have effectively led to a framework on what this transportation package can look like. We've talked about it a couple of times. It's been in a few bulletin articles. There's another update today. I had direct communication that went out to the entire membership earlier this week, and I want to thank those members that have actually already submitted some op-eds in their local community newspapers, which is terrific. So part of that focus for us right now is really that grassroots advocacy, same type of structure that we've always had. The more contact that you have with your legislators, the more success we're going to have with legislation, or the better chances we're going to have with being able to move legislation across the finish line. I don't have a bill number for you at this point in time. And that's largely because when this framework was pushed out by the Joint Committee, they were still included, or they were still involved in a lot of internal conversations. And really over the next couple of weeks, those committee members are going to be continuing that communication internally and trying to get to a point where they can create something that's, I'll just say, closer to a bipartisan package. Now, a number of those elements that were in this framework document emerged out of the conversations that they were having internally, but also informed by a lot of your involvement in the process. So all of that is, building to a point where we're going to be doing some vote counting, certainly throughout the month of May. That's coming up in another week. I expect to see an actual bill and bill language here probably within the next 2 weeks. So that is going to basically push this transportation package into pretty high intensity communication for the final month or the final half of May and perhaps into June. If you look back to the transportation package in 2017, the final floor votes that took place didn't take place until the final week of session. So we always knew this was going to be an end of session effort. The primary message, I think, for everyone today on this call is a couple of things. One, we really need to flip the dialogue and the communication to make sure that your legislators understand that half of that state highway fund money is coming to local governments. This is just not about ODOT facilities. We know that 50-30-20 is the lifeblood of what you get for your operations and maintenance, for what you can help supplant for your capital projects, and is incredibly important. And we also know that your road conditions are not exactly spectacular. Our survey work that was done last year was showing that 40% of those street miles are in poor or in very poor conditions across the state. That needs to change. And the only way it's going to change is if we get additional revenue into the system. The way this framework is structured right now, 90% of the new revenue that's being created is effectively targeted for operations and maintenance. There are not a lot of bells and whistles, golden bridges, or anything of that nature in this transportation package as it stands right now. There are still obviously some projects that they're going to try to complete with some added revenue from the 2017 priority list, but this is largely revenue that's going to be driven and targeted for operations and maintenance, and not just for an ODOT focus, but also for the flexibility that we have at the local levels to either stick it in your O&M or, again, help leverage for some of those capital projects. The other part that's important, I think, to understand too, is there's additional transit funding that's going to be coming forward. A lot of communities that took advantage of that transit money last time around were a few rural communities, and at least based on a lot of that tour work that I was involved with over the summer and the fall, that's still a high priority for a lot of communities. So there will be some specific targeting of transit money going into rural communities to help expand existing service that they established after 2017, but also looking for new opportunities to get that intercity connections that a lot of our rural communities want to provide some transportation alternatives. The other part of this ultimately comes down to some really important elements for ODOT, and that is a focus on a hell of a lot better transparency and more accountability in their management of their portion of that state highway fund. Clearly have been some missteps. Some of it's certainly their own culpability. Some of it's probably any number of other things that are out there. But bottom line is there's going to be a lot more oversight going forward with this transportation on ODOT than what they've had in the past to try to reduce any of the missteps or accounting problems and things of that nature that they've had over time. So I think those are all really good elements that are going to help build a strong package going forward. And based on the bulletin article that's out today, and what I've been pushing in some of my direct communication is you really definitely need to get out there, communicate the importance of this to your legislators as well as your own local communities to make sure that they understand where their transportation funding is coming from and the importance of knowing that effectively every single person who pays into the system is going to get some of that money back into their own communities. So appreciate the indulgence here on my portion of today. Next up, Michael Martin, top priority here coming in on operator and training. Give us an update and what you need from us.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Michael Martin, I'm one of your lobbyists here at the League, cover water, wastewater, solid waste, and natural resources. Want to give you a quick update on one of our top 9 priorities, the operator and training or water workforce. Just as a reminder, this bill, as it's written, would provide $3.5 million through HEC, the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, and out to workforce development boards to be able to be accessed for training drinking water and wastewater operators. Why this is important, as you all know very well, there's a lot of workforce challenges, but the workforce challenges around finding drinking water and wastewater operators is a huge concern. And we've got support from the Water Caucus on this bill. It's been pushed as a priority, and we're still waiting for it to be pushed to whatever Ways and Means Committee. It's very likely that it's going to go to the Subcommittee on Education. And just to kind of re-emphasize something that Jim said at the top, is what I am hearing from folks is before the 15th revenue forecast, 14th, 15th revenue forecast in May, they're going to be doing a lot of agency budgets. And then about that time, they're going to start with these other bills like this one. So what's really important is just think of those stories. You all have them about why you need drinking water or wastewater operators. And when we reach out to turn on that like advocacy and reach out to your legislators, please do so, because as Jenna said and others, your advocacy does matter, and it's really getting a lot of traction, despite all the challenges that cities are facing. So just a quick update for you. Thank you. You're muted, Jim.
Ugh, sorry. Are there any particular members that our folks need to be targeting or having their legislators talk to? Is it really just about a call out to the Ways and Means folks?
Yeah, I think in terms of targeting, yes, that is like prioritizing the folks on the Ways and Means Committee, I think, is one of the most helpful things right now.
Okay, super. Thanks for that. Scott, let's bring you back in with two other bills here for you. You've got Senate Bill 473, threats to public officials, as well as Senate Bill 170, that's assault for due to occupation. Two things of which I'm not really sure what are.
Oh, okay. Well, if you don't know what threats to public officials are, congratulations. You're lucky, but unfortunately, not all of our members are in that situation. So 473 makes it a miss to provide make a credible threat, meaning that a reasonable person would be fear of death or serious physical injury. Or communicate that threat to an official. Official is it's a little bit vague, but it's not as broad as, say, the public official definition we see in the ethics statute. So we're talking elected officials, attorneys, DAs, DAs, judges, but it's appointed. So it could be it's a little bit broader than simple elected officials. So appointed officials would be covered, and it makes that an A miss to threaten those people in a credible way, and then that would aggravate to a C felony for a repeat offense. It came out of the Senate on a very wide margin. Interesting committee hearings. The proponents of the bill, the supporters, City of Eugene, the League, AOC, others. We got a good quality grilling on the stand from Judiciary Committee members on it, but it did come out of the Senate almost, I believe, unanimously. More questions on the House. Dealing with threats to public officials and official safety has been an issue for the League for some time, and so this bill is definitely a step in the right direction. If you, again, because of the vote margin, we're probably not going to do an alert on it, but if while you were talking to your legislators again, and we know you all are staying in a regular communication with them, something to mention as part of that. I caution people, tell your story, don't tell somebody else's. The League's always very conservative how we present this issue to the legislature, because we don't want something to come out and then cause a disturbed or misguided individual to make a situation worse for one of our members. So tell your stories or speak in generalities on this one, but it is an important issue. And Senate Bill 170 was kind of a sleeper bill for us, but it was also heard in Senate Judiciary. This bill deals with assaults due to somebody's occupation. And what it does is aggravates an assault for if a person has assaulted someone because of their occupation 3 times. So you would get on the third assault that would aggravate to the C felony. We do have some people who have probably qualify for this, who have assaulted public employees or our members, or maybe have 1 or 2 of those, but need an additional deterrent. The penalties for a C felony significantly more than an A misdemeanor. So that bill is going through as well. House Judiciary had some questions on it. If you haven't had an issue with your employees being injured, assaulted while on duty, I think this is definitely one you want to talk to your House members about.
Okay, thank you for that, Scott. So quick question on the public threats to public officials, just to make sure I understand. This is a combination of folks who are elected officials, appointed positions, but also just staff as well, right?
I think the courts are going to have to interpret that. The league had asked for, when this bill was originally drafted, we had wanted to use a broad definition for employees, staff, volunteers, electeds, everyone who's doing the public's business. That wasn't viable on the Senate side. They didn't want to do something that broad, but then they added this language about an appointed official. And so that broadens it. I suspect the courts are going to have to weigh in here on what that means.
Okay.
Exactly. Hopefully people will get the message and not engage in this conduct any further, and we have other strategies for folks who have to deal with that, but that's where we're at now.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks for the clarification on
Yeah.
that. So next up, we're going to kind of shift into really emerging issues, some important elements here over the next couple of weeks that we also want to make sure that we cover. So I've got Jenna Jones teed up next, and she can talk about the ARPA state and local fiscal recovery funds deadline that's coming up here on the 30th. We know that there are still a number of outstanding, I'll just say, compliance issues associated with a few cities that are out there that I know we've been in direct contact with, but Jenna, go ahead.
Yeah, you all have probably seen this in the bulletin. I also brought it up at the beginning of April, but next week on Wednesday is the ARPA deadline to report your expenditures. Your ARPA reports are cumulative, so you can go back in and change to add more detail and get them in by April 30th. I know the National League of Cities has been really working with the Department of Treasury to be helpful in any way. There's a new updated FAQ in the bulletin article. I'll link the bulletin in the chat. If you are having issues getting login information because there was turnover in your city, let me know. I will try to help connect you with Treasury or NLC. But if you do not report on these funds, the Treasury is going to start looking to claw back ARPA funds. So please, please, please fill out your reports. If you see any of your city manager friends, tell them, check up, make sure everyone's on their ARPA reports. And if you have any questions, reach out to me. Next Wednesday is the big day that they all need to be submitted.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that. Let's see, move down to Michael Martin. He's got an update here on some FEMA grant money. Not a great update for a lot of cities, but nevertheless, still very important to get out there to folks that haven't seen communications commands. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, as Jim said, it's unfortunate. This isn't good news, but as you all know, there were a slew of executive orders with the incoming administration. And one of those things addressed the building resilient infrastructure and communities, otherwise known as BRIC grants. And we got word that there was going to be an impact to these, and we were able to see the cities impacted. There's a bulletin article in there, but effectively, the BRIC grants, any projects that were selected but not yet awarded won't receive funding. Ongoing projects might be delayed. One of the things that would be helpful if you have a project that was impacted in the BRIC grant announcement is OEM does not have, they have some awareness of sunk costs, but they don't have, we don't have full awareness of the impact if, you were the upfront costs that our members put toward working toward these grants. So if you want, you can send me an email. Any details on that would be helpful. But we have a bulletin article, and it just, I think it shows a lot of the challenges that cities are facing right now from the federal level. And I just think I wanted you all to be aware of it, and know that we're working with the National League of Cities as there's some adjustments to FEMA that are coming through some executive orders. So just wanted to put that out there.
Right. Michael, how many cities are we talking about impacted by this just in Oregon?
Yeah, I believe there are four is what I know of right now.
Okay, just four cities. I think there's a total of 25 projects impacted. So that's county level. It's
yes, even state agencies,
et cetera. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
And if I'm looking at the chart, you can pull this detail right off the bulletin article and stuff. But if I'm reading this correctly, it's a hit of just under $140 million of lost federal funding on these projects. And typically when you look at the local shares on this, it can be somewhere between a half of that or sometimes slightly more than that. So it's a pretty significant hit.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So finally, before we get to Q&A, I'll get Scott Winkles back on to talk about Senate Bill 916. This is the unemployment insurance benefits that striking workers would be able to consider in the future. So go ahead.
So I've given you all a break on this bill for the last few weeks when it traversed out of the Senate. But we're now in the House. Next week will be a pivotal week in the path of this legislation. On Monday, there will be an informational hearing. That's a hearing where the committee asks specific groups to come and testify on a bill, usually just to provide a factual backgrounding on it. I believe the only testimony that they'll be taken is from the Employment Department, and members will get to ask questions on the impacts to the implementing agency. On Wednesday will be the day, the public hearing, and we will be putting an alert out on this one. I will be asking for written testimony. People who want to sign up and testify verbally on record, and then a follow-up alert on the bill. This bill, if you recall, it would allow workers who have gone out on strike, a lawful strike, to receive unemployment benefits. Because of the way public agencies repay the unemployment insurance fund, they just pay it back dollar for dollar, as opposed to paying the employment insurance tax. An agency would be dealing with hiring replacement workers. The unemployment insurance costs and what other costs are associated with the strikes would be very expensive, and it would result in the taxpayer subsidizing a disruption in public services. So troubling piece of legislation, and next week's going to be pivotal on its path.
Thanks very much for that, Scott. So we are at a point half past the hour and are into Q&A. So Kevin, do you want to take over with some additional messaging here?
Yeah, let's get rolling here. I'm just kind of scrolling back through chat. And Mayor Graham from Ashland did have some thoughts on TLT. So Jenna, I don't know if this is something you want to weigh in on, and I want to just bring it to everybody's attention. She noted that in talking with her legislative representatives on TLT, she's been focusing on the fact that some communities, in this case coastal, don't need to advertise ever. What they need is the flexibility to handle the services the visitors require, especially since revenue reform at the state level hasn't been successful to date. Jenna, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that is good messaging. I think that's something we've definitely been talking about is our friends at the coast, ones by the mountain, like Mount Hood, or in Central Oregon and Bend, that in high tourist volume areas that they don't actually need to spend 70% of their funds promoting tourism or building new tourism related facilities because they've shown that they have enough visitors regularly without that, and that the impacts, they need to start managing tourism and their impacts. I think the other side of that same coin, though, is there are cities near very large tourist areas, or another thing we see is universities. So if you think of like cities just outside of Eugene or cities just outside of Corvallis, so Coburg or Albany, they get a lot of traffic because those are large university cities that have a lot of sporting events and the like, and people frequently stay there, but it's not necessarily that they're coming for those cities. They're coming for something adjacent. And so you see a lot of impacts on those kind of pass-through cities, and you don't necessarily need to market or don't have something that's going to bring people. And so that's another side of that to kind of emphasize is sometimes you're just kind of a stop along the way to a really cool tourist attraction, which somewhat makes you a tourist attraction when we talk TLT terms.
Jenna, on that on a different issue, I'm wondering if maybe we also kind of want to share a little bit more about this conversation you're having about the list of cities that need to report for ARPA. Is that something we're able to share?
I am going to email some of the folks who are on the list that need to kind of get into compliance on ARPA later this afternoon. So if you get that email from me, you'll know that you still need to file or you've been non-compliant. I won't put it out publicly. And then just for other folks who it seems like you've been in compliance, just keep doing what you're doing, and make sure you do it before April 30th.
Thanks for that. We have Mayor Cross from Toledo checking in on FEMA BIOP. I believe that's a Michael Martin question. Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Cross. So what I know is kind of static at this point. We know that there are ongoing discussions with FEMA administration on the FEMA BIOP to address this. Haven't been made aware of any of the details of those conversations. I just know that FEMA BIOP is part of that discussion. And just as a reminder to the group, thanks to Jim and our legislative director and executive director, Patty Mulvihill, went and met with White House staff and addressed this issue. So I think conversations are ongoing, and the moment we hear anything, let you know.
Thanks, Michael. Don't want to put you on the spot necessarily, but you did share something in our group chat here about what's going on with the cyber attack on DEQ. You want to just pass along the essence of that message from DEQ?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, so there was just an article that came out of OPB about 20 minutes ago about the data that hackers took from DEQ, and they just released that. I think they're just trying to assess what type of personal information was released. The report alluded to personal information of DEQ staff, but I think more germane and to the point for us is, I think one, this is always a good reminder, and I think Nolan, who does a lot of our cybersecurity policy work, would agree, is like, be extra cautious. Anything that you're working with, in links, and then Two, this is bad timing because your DEQ online, where we were going to move a lot of the DEQ is moving a lot of the wastewater, the permitting processes to be handled online. This I don't have a full sense of what's happening with that, but this could negatively impact that. And then also, if you were wanting to expand your recycling program and get money for that, if you'd been in contact with DEQ, it's likely that your information was not received. So if there's something that maybe a deadline has passed, I think it's worth reaching out again, maybe like a phone call or something, just to make sure that they've received your information. So I think that's its relevance for us at the top level. You're on mute. Yeah.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thanks for pointing that out. And I'm not seeing anything else coming in through the chat. So we'll give this a little bit more time. See if anybody else wants to weigh in. And as I say that, Mayor Graham weighs in. How is the league looking at a proposal to hold the kicker into a trust fund for wildfire work? I'm looking at you, Jim.
No, it's a good question. So there are a number of different proposals out there to try to get this gap funding for wildfire, and then the resilience investments out there. Lottery funds, part of that. Kicker has been certainly been teed up. I don't expect enough momentum in this legislature to move the kicker option forward. For those not familiar with the concept, is to take the kicker one time, turn it into a trust fund, and then basically live off the interest that would be generated out, and that would pretty much close a 75-80% of the gap in the funding. But there's not a whole lot of support for that in the legislature at this time. This is one of those tough issues that continues to kind of get kicked down the road. We met with the governor this week, Patty and I, as well as Mayor Engelke and Mayor McInnes, and we're going to be doing quarterly meetings with the governor here going forward. And this wildfire funding came up from the governor, really wanted some help supporting what she's after. And part of her proposal here is to take a one-time rainy day fund and dump that into the gap. The other part of this is really more fixated on the legislature to identify more permanent funding solutions. And that could be anything from bottle bill money. It could be possibly running an initiative on the lottery side. That would take a little bit of time to go, but that's still going to continue to be kind of a push for my portfolio here going forward, and hope over the next few weeks to identify some viable options. The tough thing that we've got in front of us is the vast majority of what's been identified for that wildfire gap funding are really, I'll say, general fund shifts. And Ways and Means folks have been very reluctant to make any commitments because, as usual, even though there's a surplus out there, we still are faced with an unknown on loss of federal money. We don't know what that is going to look like. So they're kind of trying to approach their final budgeting decisions with some type of conservatism to try to prepare for possible loss of federal money, which for not just Oregon, but virtually any other state that's out there can be pretty significant. So this will be an ongoing conversation for sure.
All right, Jim, thank you for that. Checking the chat again, not seeing any questions. So I think we're going to wrap her up here. It's about quarter till. Oh, it just.
And then I saw a hand.
Yep. You saw a hand. I'm not seeing
Yeah,
one.
thank you. It's David Ford, Mayor Dundee. Jim, just a quick question to you related to some of these funding issues, including the transportation package, because of this uncertainty related to federal funding. Do you sense that we'll be able to resolve all the budget issues in the current session, or should we expect a kick the can down the road to the feds sort out their mess and a special session to finalize budget later this year?
Thank you, Mayor. Good question. I'll say my crystal ball right now is telling me I don't think they're going to be able to get to a high level of confidence at the end of this cycle with budget decisions, because I think what's been trickling out from the feds has been relatively slow. It's been chaotic, obviously. So it may take several months before we finally see what those impacts are going to look like. So I wouldn't be surprised that whatever budget decision they make at this point, or by the time this session closes up, that they'll have to come back with some type of adjustments. And I think that's part of what I offered earlier is I think they're trying to approach this with a certain amount of conservatism and trying to hold some money back in preparation for what could happen. And if it doesn't, then they'll be able to feed that back into the system and go forward. But I'd be pretty shocked if they're going to hit a high level of confidence based on where this communication from the administration has been coming about holdbacks and where the funding is coming from.
Thanks for the question, Mayor. Jim, do you want to address this question that just popped in the chat too from the city of North Bend?
Oh, for timber harvest off the Elliott. So I wish I had a little bit more detail and could answer this a little bit better, but I'll say in general, chances of seeing a 70 million board foot cut coming out of the Elliott, pretty minimal at best. That is going to be effectively a research forest in the future. It's not going to have anywhere near the cut level of what it's had historically. So I don't see that scale of logging returning to the Elliott anytime soon because of the changes that they've made in policy over here for the last couple of years. So looks like it just see. So yeah, I wasn't aware. So if OSU is looking at pulling 17 million feet as opposed to 70, that is obviously a drop in the bucket and well below the sustained yield capabilities of that forest. So yeah.
All right, Jim, thank you for that. All right, we're going to wrap it up, and I am going to, oh, hold on. FEMA updated regarding, oh, okay. There was a, Michael, do you have anything on this note that's in the chat about the FEMA?
Yeah. So to clarify, so Jordan, thanks for the question. On the FEMA BIOP and Endangered Species Act integration, what we've been tracking, like mostly is we understand that there was the PICMs, the pre-implementation compliance measures that were required, and what I've heard from some of our members that effectively through some of the executive orders, that FEMA is kind of gone dark like on this, and they have not been as responsive to some of our members. What I'm tracking more is actually we just had, and I want to take this opportunity, the case that was originally in DC District Court is actually moved to Oregon. So that's I would say a net not positive like in our direction, but there's still a lot that's so dynamic that's happening at the federal level that we're going to have to see. So I hope that helps, but if you have a question I can answer offline, I'm happy to chat with you.